Hey everyone, welcome to the very first Mission Moments podcast. I'm Ryan Aldrich, and I'm the owner of Mission 501 Consulting. And I created this podcast as a way to bring in some guests, some experts in the field of nonprofit work and placement, and everything from placement to everything with the employment journey, everything people, motivation, and engagement. And today I have a very special guest for my first podcast, hand-selected, mind you. And I'm going to introduce you to Tim Blonsky. Tim and I have worked together for quite some time now. Actually, we started our time together back in 2011, actually, as part of another pilot program, which was an employment program for placing people with disabilities that was expanding from Massachusetts into Connecticut. And Tim and I worked together for several years in that program. And Tim eventually moved to Idaho, and he is doing some work there, which I'll let him elaborate on. But I also just want to mention before I let Tim speak that he is my favorite Bills fan, although I don't have many. So, Tim, welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
I'm honored to be your guest and more honored to be your favorite Bills fan. And I think it's interesting that I'm pretty much everyone's favorite Bills fan because I'm always the one that I get like an excessive amount of texts after the latest Bills disappointing defeat, asking me if I'm okay, and because I'm the resident Bills fan in everyone's life.
So if you're everyone's favorite Bills fan, have you thought that perhaps you're the only Bills fan and that's why?
Yeah, perhaps. There might be something to that. Well, it's funny. A lot of people kind of jump on the bandwagon now that Josh Allen is the quarterback because everyone likes to watch him play and his reckless style that he has when he's down the field. But yeah, no, thank you so much for having me on board.
I should mention that Tim and I will go back and forth with football here and there because I am a very staunch Patriots fan. I'm fully aware that the Bills have the upper hand now, and Tim has been handing it to me for quite some time. And so I suppose I deserve this after all the years that we've enjoyed in the upper spot. So Tim, tell us a little bit about what you do. So my work, Mission 501, is all about working with nonprofit and healthcare organizations. What role do you play in the nonprofit world with the work that you do? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so you've already mentioned how you and I have intersected. We're working in the same program, and so we both gained a lot of experience in that pilot project. That it's a program that's still fledgling, still going, and it's pretty excited to see that. In a way, there's a little bit of a Tim and Ryan legacy kind of interweaved in that, for better or worse. And so after I left that program, I believe that was in 2015, I eventually got into the realm of workforce development. So within that, there was a whole workforce development system that is funded by the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act that was passed in 2014 that is all about public-private partnerships between for-profit companies kind of getting integrated into the workforce system and them working together toward the common goal of making sure that you have as many employed, skilled individuals in the economy. Because if you have that, then you have a robust economy and it's growing, and everyone's happy. So with that the simple concept, I facilitated some programs that helped really drive forward the aerospace industry and the aerospace alley, which has been pretty much Springfield, Mass, all the way down to New Haven, Connecticut.
Yeah, the 91 corridor of manufacturing.
Yeah, it's one of the best in the whole world. And so like I was able to fund hundreds of thousands of dollars in wage reimbursements to employers and funding to employers themselves to grow. And within that, I learned a lot about just that realm and just kind of understanding the skills gap and how that plays into what we could do to help those that are underskilled or underemployed or disadvantaged to get connected to these really, really well-paying jobs. And so, I had a little bit of a diversion from the specific focus on working with individuals with disabilities and that, but it was incredibly fun and valuable. And that almost 10 years of experience combined with the experience that we had in our previous role that you and I worked in together, I felt that it was time for me to kind of branch out into the concept of consulting and helping businesses nationally and even internationally understand labor market dynamics and all that, which I think we'll go into more detail about that later on.
Yeah, I appreciate that you mentioned that, we were working in the disability space together, and then there was some divergence away from it. And we've talked on your podcast as well about that divergence and how it's almost a good thing in a way, because the population of individuals with disabilities is still today seen as an untapped resource of talent. And I think there's this perception that there's silos and that we stay siloed in our own world. And so when professionals work in the field and then branch off, it's a loss for the field itself. And that's partly what I do as well in terms of trying to mitigate that. But that divergence can kind of come back. And I appreciate that you've done that. Like you branched off, but you're keeping that passion and that mission of this untapped resource at the core of what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really kind of an interesting thing that's happened over the last several months as I've been developing my business is the recognizing, something that I recognized when I got into the field of workforce development, where I was facilitating the wage reimbursements to employers to encourage employers to hire from certain demographics to help them fill these open positions that they're trying to fill. And keeping in mind, this is the backdrop of the recession that started in 2008,
Right.
so there were a lot of unemployed people, and so within that, we were giving employers $12,500 or even sometimes $20,000 in wage reimbursements. And I'm like, I really wish I knew that these programs existed when you and I were doing what we were doing and starting the project. And
Absolutely.
so I'm really working to increase the cross functionality between the disability employment world and the general workforce system, because there is an incredible labor shortage and there's an opportunity that lies within that.
Absolutely. So this is a time where I plug. Tim has a podcast as well under Timothy James Consulting on YouTube. It's also available on anchor.fm. So look for that as well. And you'll find some cross functionality there, because I was a guest on his podcast recently as well. So thank you for that. So we talked on your podcast, Tim, that we have some similarities in our work as well as some differences. We're both working with people, but I tend to be more behind the scenes of training and professional development and strategic planning. And you have some work behind the scenes, but you focus a lot on the community placement piece and on the career building and employer relationship piece. But tell me a little bit, how does your work tie into the mission of the professionals in the field and helping them stay engaged and motivated, and to mitigate these high levels of turnover that we see, this revolving door of provider staff in the nonprofit world that just, for whatever reason, they're not staying? How does your work tie into that?
Yeah, so I mean, that I think really kind of organically goes into the idea and concept of federally registered apprenticeship programs and how that plays into developing staff in a methodical, credentialized, structured way that, because as we know, as an economy, we're really a skills-based economy. We've gotten away from the concept of, you must have a bachelor's degree and basket weaving to get a job and whatever. We're getting away from that. We know that 85% of jobs in today's economy does not require a bachelor's degree, and 75% of those jobs don't even require an associate's degree. It's all about skills, credentialized training, certifications that in that specific field. So that's one of the things that I've gotten some expertise on in my role here that I recently left here in Idaho, that was a youth apprenticeship program in which we focused on the age group of 16 to 24. And in that, we were trying to help employers get connected to local high schools and saying, instead of posting a position on Indeed or LinkedIn, those platforms are great, and there's nothing wrong with that. I don't want to be sued by Indeed for saying something, but those concepts are really yesterday's solution to today's problem. And tomorrow's solution to today's problem just happened to be a program that was invented in 1937, and the concept of registered apprenticeship. So it's not a new concept. It's not reinventing the wheel. It's something that's tried and true. And we know that on the national scale that the retention rate for individuals that are in registered apprenticeships is 91 to 94%. So it's in between that. So that, I mean, that's almost a 100% success rate in terms of,
Yeah.
People that stay within their job when they're engaged, they're happy. One of the things that's so interesting in this environment is I've learned over, in doing this over the last 2.5, 3 years is, the one, like we have all these numbers that prove the registered apprenticeship works, and that we know there's over 1,200 different occupations that are apprenticable and like all the things. So it's pretty much applicable to any company, any employer that are looking to fill a position that they have had difficulty filling in the traditional way. Is registered apprenticeship really encourages the concept of culture, the concept of learning and development within a company. So one of the hallmarks of a registered apprenticeship is a mentor needs to be assigned to the apprentice. So you have this, individual that's been doing this job for 15, 20 years that's now training the young person, or just a person that is trying to develop the skills in a particular field.
Right.
And now the mentor is naturally motivated to do what he or she can to get better at their job, because they're really invested in teaching the apprentice to do their job well. And so they're going back to school, they're taking online classes, and it's just something that a lot of companies are like, interesting. We didn't expect that would really increase that culture of learning and development within the company. And that's something that you can't quantify with a number, but it's something that we're seeing all across the country as the national wave and movement has been centered towards registered apprenticeship again over the last 5 to 7 years. So it's been fun to see that.
Yeah, and you mentioned that the apprenticeship model was kind of formalized, in you said 1937, and I think that's another example of something that was just kind of sitting out there. Apprenticeships are not a 1937 thing. The idea of apprenticeships goes back to colonial days and beyond. Really, it's simply that finally in the mid 20th century that people realized, wow, this is a model that we should really be utilizing in a more widespread and formalized way. Very similar to the population of people with disabilities who have this untapped resource that it's taken until really very recently to realize, wow, this is an untapped talent pool that can really contribute and be just and have an equitable impact on our workplace as anyone else. And that's where we drive this diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So I really appreciate that you included that. So in terms of that learning and professional development, you mentioned how being a mentor increases productivity and motivation for the mentor, and also increases the skills of the apprentice. So it really is this twofold sense of growth. So in terms of that training and professional development piece, you've worked with a number of organizations. Where do you think organizations are kind of missing the mark on this, and what might you suggest as some first steps? We know that registered apprenticeship programs are a wonderful solution, but they can also take a lot of time to implement and perfect. So what do you see as some of the barriers, and what do you suggest organizations do as some first steps to say, let's acknowledge and step towards improvement?
Well, it's interesting. I've observed, and maybe this is just me, but I have a pretty good cross section of employers that I've worked with over the last 7 to 10 years in this realm. Is really most employers are they're just sort of existing in terms of their internal policies. They're not actually thinking in a proactive way about how to build their talent in a proactive way. So you have VP of something that's telling VP of HR, fill this position tomorrow or else, and so they're scrambling, they're trying to fill this position. And they're not thinking about why is it hard for us to fill this position? What can we do over the next 6 to 10 months to make sure that we're not in this emergency where we need to fill this position now? And then in that realm, so HR professional, they do a great job, they fill that position, but it wasn't the right fit because they're just trying to plug someone in to fill that position just to make VP happy. And so it really comes down to, I hate to say this, but hire a really good workforce consultant like Ryan Aldrich or Tim Blonsky to come in like, sit down and have those conversations that they don't have the mental capacity or the wherewithal or the time to even think about, and to say, okay, you got these 4 or 5 positions. Here's what we can do to proactively fill them. We can start tapping into non-traditional talent pools like, vocational rehabilitation, like the American Job Centers in your Pacific region, like the Workforce Development Board,
Mhm.
local high schools, local community colleges, rather than just traditional Indeed post a position, spend $1,000 in posting it, and cross your fingers for someone with the right skills to apply for that job. So it really comes down to like, I just find, and I've talked to a lot of HR professionals that agree with me on this, is um, the general concept that that field is really about putting out the fires of today, rather than
Mhm.
trying to find some way to prevent those fires from happening in the future. So
Yeah,
I
sure.
know that's an overly simplified answer, but it's really that simple. Like, they're missing the mark, and the fact that they're not even touching the mark because they just don't have the time to. And that's where we can come in to kind of help them in a very low cost way to address those future problems from happening in the first place.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of internalization that happens, and I think sometimes the idea of we've talked about this before, that bringing in a consultant is somehow an acknowledgement of failure. We were unable to do this on our own, and we failed. Now we need to pay somebody or bring in somebody to do it. And you and I, as we talk at length about how that's absolutely not the case. That's not the philosophy that we bring into our work. It's not acknowledging. It's not saying that you failed and now you need help. It's that there is so much that goes into operations of any business, especially within HR, with regulatory things, and then as well as the recruitment, onboarding, everything else. It's a lot of different hats that people wear. And if you have an expert in motivation and engagement within your organization, let me tell you, you have a gem, folks, and hang on to that person, because it doesn't happen very often. And that's why Tim and I do the work that we do. So yeah, we're both consultants. Of course, we're going to plug ourselves on the podcast, but it really doesn't come from a place of acknowledging failure. It comes from a place of knowing that we have expertise and truly wanting to help and form those long-term partnerships. So
Yeah, and like Ryan, I'm sure you agree that we're not in this for the money per se.
mhm,
Obviously we want to make a living wage,
right,
have stuff like that, but
sure, yeah,
we're both in the realm of we really want to help people. Um, and that really what it comes down to, and that's what my passion is. That's what I enjoy, is connecting with people and helping them. And even if it's just for like a quick, like 3 months, let's work on this project, let's finish it and then move on. But
mhm,
one of the things that I've told some prospective clients of mine is a contract with me in a consulting business is not just a one-time thing and then bye-bye, I'm done.
right.
It
Same for
is
me.
an ongoing relationship that's going to really last forever. So you contact me 2 years later, hey Tim, what do you think about this? I'm not going to be charging you for that, unless it's like we're going to embark on a new project. Like, we're friends forever, just like you and I, Ryan. We've been pretty, we're friends. Like, even though we've been disconnected for a long time, but
Mhm.
it's just sort of like our thought process.
Listen, you're the one that took off to Idaho, not me. So,
Yeah,
but
sorry.
I see those beautiful mountains in the background, and I can see why you did. So which is great. So Tim, you've a little bit earlier you mentioned, again, not to bash Indeed and LinkedIn and all of those online job forums, because that alone has been, in the last decade, a revolutionary way to bring jobs to people instead of the old school classified ads. And the networking in the hidden job market will never go away. It is about often who you know and not about what you know. But Indeed
Yeah,
and LinkedIn have done a great deal to bring jobs to the forefront, especially now that we're still working through the very end of this pandemic, which brought virtual work and remote work into the forefront as well. You mentioned that these platforms are kind of turning into yesterday, and you've spoken at length about how, in your words, the economy is fundamentally shifting, and asking if people are ready for that. Can you speak a little bit, like, what when you said the economy is fundamentally shifting, what do you mean by that, and what can people do to prepare for it?
yeah. I'm gonna have to try to not go into get on my soapbox here, because this is something that I'm very passionate about. But
Yeah.
we know that there are 72 million people that are the baby boomer generation that is in the process of retiring. Many of them retired during the pandemic. We know that 1.4 million baby boomers are going to retire between 2023 and 2030. Then they're going to be gone. There's no more baby boomers in that generation. Then the next generation, which is going to age Ryan and myself, is the generation that has 61 million people in it. So 72 million people are leaving the workforce, and 61 million people are basically replacing that workforce. And then the subsequent generations after that, there are some shifts in the numbers in that. But we are seeing something in what we know that there's already a labor shortage. Right now, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics from just last month, there's about 9.8 million open jobs in the United States. So if we take almost 10 million open jobs, given the fact that we have a demographic shift in which there's 11 million less people that are going to be replacing the generation that's leaving the workforce, it's only going to get worse. But the thing is when I try to communicate that message, I am not communicating a message of doom and gloom that it's all over, there's no hope, and that sort of thing. There is a lot of opportunity within that. So there's artificial intelligence, which is a big conversation these days. It's tapping into individuals with disabilities, as tapping into local high schools. There are just so many solutions within us that that's really what excites me. Okay, we got a problem, but Tim, or Ryan, we have potential solutions to these problems, and it's such a low cost way to be able to address these, and really employers need to start addressing these issues now. Again, if we go into putting out the fires, you really don't want to be in a place of putting out the fires of you cannot literally find anybody in a vacuum of talent. Start proactively addressing the problems now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you mentioned some generational things, and this might be a future conversation between you and I, because I think you consider yourself a Gen X person, which would be the generation after the baby boomers. I am a millennial, so I'm actually a little bit after you. I know we're only 4 or 5 years apart, but I have looked at this. I do consider myself a millennial, and sometime we're going to have a conversation on how we view the working world, because I know, knowing you in the many years that I have, we have a lot of similarities, but I think we also see a couple of things differently. And I love talking about generational motivation, because that is a huge component that plays into all of this as well, that all these, these workplaces that are currently led by baby boomers and perhaps older Gen X's and into the middle of the Gen X population, they have specific expectations of what a workplace culture looks like. And as they leave, it's not just about the person and the talent that's leaving, it's also about the definition of the culture. And so when culture shifts, you could have a nice cohesive workplace that all of a sudden, with a new leader comes in of a different generation, kind of upturns everything. And that could be for better or for worse. And that's a whole other ball game of where a culture consultant and a consultant could come in and say, well, wow, this change is inevitable when leadership changes. Here's how you can navigate that with minimal damage.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And for better or worse, that we can't change that all of this is going to happen. So being proactive and addressing the changes is, like the employers that I know, that I've come across, that I have relationships with, Connecticut here and here in Idaho and other places, the employers that have a seat at the table in regard to workforce development and workforce development policy and the public-private partnerships, those are the employers that are succeeding and growing. So it comes down to that, and that's where I can come in to really help employers get connected to the local workforce system. So, whether it's, I got employers here in Idaho that are in North Dakota and South Dakota and Louisiana and South Carolina, I can help them get connected to all the different local workforce systems within every one of those states, from the local into the zip code to state level and up into the federal level.
I think if there's anything to kind of define the theme that we're talking about today, it's to be open. You talk about having a seat at the table, and I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, that this metaphorical table has an infinite number of seats at it. There's no such thing as we don't have room for you. We are all about diversity and equity and inclusion, and this table grows as people sit at it. That there's room for everyone.
Oh, there absolutely is. It's a big tent. It's a big table. Yeah, so and it's really, really valuable to be a part of it because like employers can actually get tapped into funding to train people, like $12,500 on the job training contracts that I was doing
Yeah.
with them. Um, or like I have this employer that I know of that's in Middletown, Connecticut that what they were doing was a very hard skill set to hire for. So because they had a seat at the table, they started being able to encourage the local community college in Middletown to create classes to train people for the skill set that they needed to fill these positions within the company. So, that's something that most employers don't think of. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
I can't find people. So what can we do to create, curriculum at the local community college to train a high school student for these positions? So did that solve your workforce problem right now at this very moment? It does not. But
Right. But in the
3,
long
4
game,
years from now, yeah,
in
exactly.
the long game, it does. Yeah, I think we see a lot of, and this is a lot of what I do is with motivation. We have our intrinsic motivation, which is where people feel truly valued and connected to the work that they're doing. And then you've got your extrinsic motivation, which is your rewards and your salaries and things like that. And one of the more common practices that I have seen is organizations saying, we can't find people. Throw out a $2,000 signing bonus. You come work for us, well, it's $2,000. And what's happening is people come in, they get their $2,000, and then they're gone.
Yeah.
They come in. Maybe they actually do want to try for the job, but they take that signing bonus, and then that's an extrinsic motivator. And when that intrinsic motivation is not there, there is a ton of research that I talk about where it's why people don't stay. So
Yeah, and that's another way to plug registered apprenticeship because that pretty much resolves that because it's a
yeah,
mutually beneficial investment between the apprentice and the employer because they're both investing in each other. You're getting pay raises throughout the apprenticeship. You're getting skill building throughout it. You're getting basically a pathway to go from an entry level to whatever the next level is within the company.
yeah,
Um, and we know that apprentices on average earn anywhere from 180 to $280,000 more over the course of their career compared to someone that has a bachelor's degree that or whatever field we're
right.
in.
You want to talk about extrinsic motivation, 180 to $200,000. That's some extrinsic motivation right there. So
Yes.
Tim, tell me a little bit about, in your work. We're both new consultants at this. In fact, on your podcast, we talked about how we were who started first, and I still need to check my timeline on that. But we started right around the same time. Tell us a little bit about what are some ideal partnership opportunities that you're looking for, like Timothy James Consulting. What's an ideal client for you?
Yeah. For that's a problem, but it's also a good thing. Really, my ideal partnership is really any employer in a for-profit, nonprofit world that's looking to understand labor market dynamics.
Mhm.
Because like the national conversation is we can't find people. Why like everyone's lazy, doesn't want to work. Like that's kind of a brutish language, but that's generally what
Mm,
comes out of that.
that can be the
And
perception for
so
sure. Yeah.
yeah. So it's helping employers understand the problem first, because if you can understand the problem, then we can start working towards solutions. So that really step one in my relationship with clients and employers is sitting down with the leadership teams and doing a professional development on labor market dynamics from an international scale. Like what's happening in China and Africa, European Union and India, and how that plays a role in what's happening within your own zip code.
Mhm.
Really important information. What's going to happen with demographic shifts on the national scale, all the way down to I can like
Right.
look at the specific zip code and say over the next 7 years, X number of people are going to retire, and so we know that the labor pool is going to be a little bit smaller. So here are some of the different things that you can do to increase that labor pool, and here are the different workforce programs in your specific region, and here are some of the programs that they currently have, and this federally funded grant that focuses on this or that. So like having those initial conversations with employers, so that really goes into nonprofits and helping equip, nonprofits to help find employment for people with disabilities to say, here's the labor market, here are different
Mhm.
things, here are the tools that your staff can use to better serve your clients. And then
Right.
on the for-profit world, it's, here's all the different things that you need to understand, and here are the resources that you may not be aware of that you can tap into.
Awesome. What we both do is professional development, essentially. It's just coming at it from different angles. Awesome.
Yes, exactly, important ones.
Awesome. Well, Tim, I'd like to thank you for being my very first podcast guest, and I'll be sharing Tim's contact information as well as mine. If you're watching this on YouTube, it'll be on the slides following, and we'll put it in the notes for those of you listening on a podcast app. So again, Tim, thank you so much. And this will not be the first conversation that Tim and I have. We'll look forward to other guests on the podcast. And today is August 4th, 2023, and football season is coming up among us. So as a personal plug, Tim, before we go, where do you think the Bills are going to finish this year, and where do you think the Patriots are going to finish?
Well, I think they did a lot of under the radar signings in the offseason that a lot of people don't talk about. And so like I'm forever optimistic. I was the one that was saying this is going to be the year back in like 2011 when they were terrible. The Patriots were beating them really badly every year. But I'm confident in the fact that there's a lot of things that obviously need to fall into place, which could really of any football team. But I think the Super Bowl is within the realm of possibility. They have a hard season. They're playing the NFC East this year. All the AFC East teams are playing the NFC East teams, and a lot of them are good. So we'll see. It's going to be kind of a really tough offseason, regular season, which I think is going to play into whoever gets into the playoffs are going to be very battle tested teams.
Yeah.
So I think the Super Bowl is definitely in the realm of possibility.
Okay. All right. Well, I to be fair, Tim and I have been having some of these conversations about our work, and I think I was very pragmatic last time. I think I said that not this year, 2023, but the 2024 would be the Bills' year for a title. So we'll see. Personally, for my Pats, I think it would be a bit foolhardy for me to say that they're going to take the division, but as a fan, it's what you hope for. I think I'm hoping for a playoff berth, perhaps a wild card, in the realm of maybe 10-7, 11-6, something like that. But that's why they play the games, right? And every football season, you never know. One major injury can turn a whole team and even a division around. So it'll be interesting to see. So one more time, Tim, thank you so much. And for our listeners, stay tuned for more episodes. And we look forward to hearing from you. If either Tim or I have mentioned anything that piques your interest, again, we'll have our contact information, reach on out, and we look forward to your commentary. And thank you for listening. Take care, everyone. Have a great time. Have a great night.
Thank you, Ryan.
Take care.